Hello and welcome to the 14 Going on 41 podcast. I'm Arvind and joining me is my delightful co-host, the world-schooling, Gen Z speaking, ocean-loving, bad at math and always mogging, question-asking, Kiara Arana.
Thank you for that introduction as always, Arvind. Hi, I'm Kiara. I'm world-schooled, very curious, and a teenager. So I'm here to ask questions from a teenage perspective. And it's not just us debating about how bad my mathing skills are, Arvind. Each week, we're joined by a guest who has chosen their own path and gone down the road less traveled.
That is correct. And these are folks who've, decided not to follow a map. Sometimes they've kind of folded it, put it in a pocket, maybe just thrown it away and wandered off and figured out their own unique path.
Which actually brings us nicely to today's episode because our guest literally spends his life exploring the edges of the map, the world map.
The very, very, very cold edges of the map, Kiara. Very cold.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to handle that cold, Arvind, considering you find the room where we do our podcast recordings in person freezing and you cannot handle that.
That is absolutely true. I cannot handle the Antarctic.
But I have had the good fortune of meeting our guest Mikołaj during my trip to Antarctica. And I was just 8 years old at the time. I don't think my parents quite expected me to want to learn or be able to grasp the kind of ideas that Miko and his colleagues were sharing on board. But I did, and I soaked it all up.
I mean, soaking it up in Antarctica might be that sounds cold to me too, because those waters are icy. But what I've heard is the story of you actually waking up at like 8 a.m. or just not being found in bed at 8 a.m. because your parents were like, where is Kiara gone? And she'd wandered off for a lecture.
That's right. Yeah, there were daily lessons on board, which I really, really enjoyed even at 8. But before we, meet our guest, it's time for your lesson, Arvind.
You mean our Gen Z word of the day. Okay, I'm ready for it. I'm confident because I've got the last two right. So hit me. What's today's word?
Okay, today, you should get this. Today's word is core memory.
Core memory. Core, like your abs and things that you work out. So like core memory are those exercises which you don't have to go to YouTube each time to get the form right. So like a plank, a sit-up, a crunch. Core memory because your core just remembers how to do it right.
Just when I thought you were finally understanding some modern lingo, you go and talk about exercise. You're so way off.
That's true. Why would I ever think a Gen Zer would say anything to do with physical activity? You're right. I need to
Excuse me, we don't just sit on our devices. We do have some physical activity.
That's true. You push those buttons. Maybe that's your equivalent of push. But okay, core memory. Is it like a memory from childhood that, just kind of is formative and sticks with you?
So yes, it's very formative. You're right. And let me just clarify. A core memory is a moment that kind of imprints on you. So it's something that shapes who you become later on in life without you even realizing it at that moment in time.
Oh, very interesting. I've probably had a few core memories, and sport and spreadsheets come to mind. But okay, core memories.
And the reason I picked the core memory is because it fits with today's guest, because his childhood fascination with cold places and nature turned into an actual expedition to Antarctica. So that's a core memory that definitely stuck.
And wasn't it on one of these expeditions where your world schooling journey effectively started?
Yeah, that's true. My parents got inspired by our trip to Antarctica with me going off and learning from people like Miko and attending these lectures. And I had skipped school to be there. So I was, learning so much from traveling, and that's how they got inspired.
So that sounds like a core memory for you that came while Mikołaj was living out his core memory. So that's like a core memory within a core memory. That's like some Inception level stuff right there. Double core memory. Is that a word?
I've never heard of it. But anyway, Miko turned his interest into a series of life-changing experiences. He studied elephant seals, worked in some of the coldest places on Earth, and now shares those stories with people around the world, while also being a dad and taking care of, I think it's 3 cats and a very introverted tortoise.
That is a lot to take in. Although I must say, when you said elephant seals, I was like, are these like giant seals that they use to trap elephants or something like that? Because that sounds like really interesting work. But I'm sure that's not it. And we should probably move on and bring
Your
our
jokes
guests in.
aren't funny, Arvind.
I try. So they're hit or miss.
Anyway, if you've ever wondered what happens when a childhood curiosity turns into a lifetime of adventure, stay with us because we will be back with
Mikołaj Golachowski.
We are back and joined by Mikołaj Golachowski, expedition guide, historian, marine biologist, and veteran of multiple Antarctic overwintering missions, including leading the 32nd Polish Antarctic expedition. From studying elephant seals to sharing polar history aboard expedition ships, Miko has built a life shaped by curiosity, science, and exploration. It is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hello, thank you very much for invitation. And I have a few comments to your introduction already because Arvind, I'm not sure if you are a father, but you would make an excellent dad with the level of your jokes. Absolutely. That was very impressive. I can learn from you. And I'm pretty bad. Like you
They've
can
been
ask my
called
daughter.
bad,
but-
sad. So
Yes. And my menagerie at home has changed in the meantime since I last saw you, Kiara. So it's only 2 cats now because one of them died at the age of 20. And the tortoise is still going strong. But I also have a dog who is now 4.5 years old. And she's quite fun.
nice. No elephant seals at home.
No elephant seals at home. I live on the 4th floor, and I don't think the building would support an elephant seal.
And in addition to all the background Kiara gave about you, Miko, she also said something about you being one of the most fun people on the expedition. You had something about that, right, Kiara?
Yeah, so for listeners, Miko was one of around, I think, 30 expedition experts that were on board the ship that we were on. And he was one of the most fun ones. I remember him as Santa Claus and him giving me a book for Christmas as well. So a lot of fun memories with you, Miko, and I hope the podcast will be another one to add to the list.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. I'm really quite happy to see you now.
And actually, Miko, now that listeners can't see this, but I can see you pulling off the entire Santa Claus look.
We are quite lazy, so we chose the one that didn't need any makeup or anything. I am Santa Claus, basically. So it was very easy.
Yeah, you do live far up north, so you know.
No, well, I think it's only related to where you are.
That's true.
I do live in the northern hemisphere, but I live in Poland, which is sort of temperate zone, right? There's a lot of north beyond us still. But yes, definitely further north than you do.
That is true.
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump straight into the questions. And actually, on this podcast, we love to talk about the fork in the road moments. But before we get into that, since also another theme is 14 years old, 41, going back to when you were 14, Miko, what did you love learning about? What were your passions? What did you see your career looking like when you were older?
I've always liked animals. It comes from my early childhood. I guess the first books that my parents read for me and then the books that I read for myself were all about animals and also about traveling in very far northern countries. So writers such as Jack London or James Oliver Curwood were my favorite when I was a kid. And they all described their Arctic adventures and so on. So I grew up not only with the love for animals, but also with a natural inclination towards cold regions. Also, on a even physiological level, I just basically enjoy it when it's cold much more than I like the heat. And my early childhood memories are like it's a hot summer in Poland, and it gets quite hot in Poland, like 30 degrees centigrade and sometimes even 40. And I remember as a very, very small child falling asleep, hugging the cold radiator close to my bed. Basically, it's made of metal, right? In winter, it's hot. Yeah. But in summer, it's super cold. So I would put my palms on it and my feet on it just to get cooler than I was. So I really like the cold.
I have to say, Miko, I have probably the opposite experience. So you love the cold, you love animals, you've read story of these explorers, but how did all that translate into you trying to figure out what to study and how to get into science in the first place? And was that a conscious choice or did you kind of fall into it?
No, I think it was a sort of a river that flew in the right direction. Because basically, when I was 14, I was interested in animals, but I also was interested in literature, which I still am, and I liked learning languages and so on. So when I was getting a bit older, I remember in Poland, you have to make a choice where to go to the university at the age of sort of 17, 18. And then I had no idea what to do. Like I liked archaeology. I thought about maybe Polish literature. Later on, I realized, okay, I don't really have to study Polish literature. I still read a lot of books anyway. I don't really have to study linguistics. I like learning languages. But still, it was either medicine or veterinary science or forestry. And then I thought, well, actually, all those things are just applications of biology. And biology is at the core, if you like, of those applications. So if I want to understand anything, then biology is probably the best thing to study. And this is what I did. And I quite enjoyed it. Not all parts of biology, mind you, because it's a very wide subject. And, I liked animal ecology. I like animal behavior. I quite like botany, but not with a passion. And I really liked genetics, but I hated biochemistry, for example, and things like this. So there were some parts of biology that I didn't enjoy, but this is the path I followed. And
But that's
initially,
sorry to interrupt, but that's a very informed view as a 17-year-old, because I remember, at least in my time, it was like, oh, go to engineering because you might end up with a secure job later, or it just is the safer path. Like the fact that you at that point realized, oh, this is something I'm passionate about and really wanted to learn is really interesting, because I don't think everyone necessarily gets that.
I think I was very lucky with my parents, because my father is a professor of economics and his father was a professor of geography. So there is a tradition in my family. And my mother was also, well, she was not an academic, but she did work at the university. There is a bit of a tradition in my family that we pursue what we are passionate about, and we don't seem to interfere with everybody's choices. So my father was open-minded enough to realize that I'm actually passionate about biology and animals, and he strongly supported it, even though he had nothing to do with it. He is a professor of a business school, but they never tried to push me somewhere based on the fact that, oh yeah, you'll have a secure job or something like this. They always supported my passion, and I see it as a great gift. And this is exactly what I'm trying to do for my daughter as well.
Very impressive. Out of curiosity, are there certain, it's early for her, but are there certain things you're seeing her interested in which are different from you?
Yes, she is interested in arts. She also likes animals, but she's kind of doomed because she's surrounded by animals. And so like this is, I'm afraid, a bit of a...
She better like animals.
Yeah, I'm afraid a bit of a default, but I've no idea. And I always think that following your passion is possibly the wisest choice that you can make.
So I know you talked about your parents' support, but if you go out in Warsaw and you talk to people about what you're doing, what is most people's reaction to your quite unusual path?
Well, that unusual path that you're referring to, that's a matter of the last 23 years, right? Initially, as a biologist, they would just think, well, all right, biologist, whatever. Now, when I say that I'm a guide in Antarctica, that's not very usual. I think that at this time, I'm probably the only person in Poland who is a guide in Antarctica, at least in that way as I work, which is being a guide on a ship. There are some others who organize like skiing trips and things like this, but there's very, very few of us. So that's not a very typical thing to do.
So let's go back. So you're a biologist. You've realized there's this passion for animals. There's certain things that you enjoy. How do you go from there to winding up on an expedition in Antarctica? What's that story and what's that journey?
Well, since this podcast apparently is about forks in life,
Yeah.
there was a massive fork in my life at some stage because, as I already mentioned, I come from this background where my father is a professor, his brother is a professor, their sister was a professor, and their father was a professor, and so on. So it's
I'm
like,
sensing a
for
theme
me,
here.
basically, for me, it was natural that when you study something at the university, you want to study it in greater depth. So after you graduate, you end up working at the university as a teacher
Mhm.
and doing your PhD and so on, so on. So basically, when I graduated, I already had a job at my faculty of biology. And I later on, I started doing my PhD. And I thought that my path is very clear. I would become an old professor at some point. And I enjoyed it. I quite liked it because I love teaching at the university. I'm a much better teacher than I'm a scientist. Basically, I'd rather know a lot about a lot of things than everything about a narrow subject. And also, I prefer to make the total body of knowledge wider rather than deeper. So with students, the university was a perfect environment for me because students are clever. They're not any stupider than their teachers. They're just younger. So this is why I'm on this side and the students are on the other side. But basically, the questions that they ask allow me to look, they are, in the best sense of the word, naive questions, right? They allow me to look at what I'm talking about in a different light, at a different angle. And that means that I'm learning from my students just as much as they are learning from me because I need to rethink of what I'm talking about. So that path looked very clear. I already was halfway through my PhD and I had a position that was promised to me. And I was supposed to, again, start working as a teacher at the university. And then that would eventually lead to further steps in the academic career. However, towards the end of my PhD, I've learned that that position that has been promised to me is gone because there was some restructuring in my faculty and suddenly that position was no longer available. So by circumstances, I was forced to think about something else because I had sort of gotten used to the idea that I will continue working at the university. And then I thought, and that was quite a stupid and naive move on my behalf because I thought, well, at this stage, some of my friends had already been to Antarctica to work at the Polish Antarctic Station. And back then, 23 years ago, it was relatively easy to go there for the entire year because not many people can take a year out of their life and go to Antarctica. Everybody would like to go there for summer because it's just a few months, it's fun, there's plenty of animals and so on. But to go there for an entire year was maybe not so tempting for everybody. So I didn't have any problems I had to write a grant that would take me there. So I thought I would study elephant seals because I had always studied carnivores. So my PhD was about American mink. My earlier master degrees was about foxes and martens. And I always liked animal behavior. There is this area of science called behavioral ecology, which is why do the animals do the things that they do. And as I said, I always liked genetics. So a lot of answers for the questions from behavioral ecology come from genetics, actually. You analyze DNA of animals to find out what they're doing with each other, basically, like who is related to whom and so on. So especially if you study reproductive strategies, for example, then you can work out which is efficient, like who ends up producing more offspring. So that was my incentive for studying elephant seals because they not only belong to the order of carnivores, but they also have a very exciting breeding strategy. And it would get me to Antarctica.
And elephant seals was then chosen because for Antarctica, they were the carnivores and they had this unique history versus, was there something about elephant seals in particular versus, say, something else that you found fascinating?
No, well, they have a fascinating strategy. They have those huge males. And when I mean huge, when I say huge, I mean it. It's like they can weigh up to 3.5 tons, sometimes even 5 tons. So it's like a truck. And they can measure up to the largest one, I believe, was about 6.5 meters long. So they are like Yeah,
Wow.
they're so big that they sort of exceed the scope of interest of zoology and enter the scope of cartography, because you should really mark them on charts as little hills, but the hills keep moving, right? And you have those huge males, and the females are much smaller. They only weigh about 700 or 800 kilos, so they're
Only
still
seven
big.
or 800. Yeah.
Only, yes,
Yeah.
they're still big, but they're 6 times smaller than the male. And whenever you have such a big difference, we call it the sexual dimorphism, a big difference between a male and a female, you can guess that the males will be competing, and the competition will be quite violent, probably. So I had to go there, collect DNA samples from all sorts of groups of animals, and then work it out. But basically, why I call it stupid and naive, at that stage of my life, I didn't know what I want to do next. I knew that I cannot stay at the university. So I thought 1 year in Antarctica will give me plenty of opportunity to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, right? And here I am 23 years later, and I still haven't figured out what to do when I grow up, because
Or you found what you love.
yeah, I guess so. I guess so. But it's sort of by default, because the problem with Antarctica is that it's highly addictive. So, once I've been there, I always want to keep going back there. So, yes, it changed my career, but really it was this major fork. And in a way, it started with a kick in my butt, right? Because I thought that I would have a career at the university, and it turned out not to be the case. And then it was a kick in the right direction, because this is how I ended up in Antarctica in the first place. So for the first few years, I worked as a scientist. As Kiara said, I was also the leader of an expedition. I didn't have multiple winters in Antarctica. I only spent 2 winters in Antarctica. Altogether, I lived at the station for about 3 years over a span of about 7 years. So it was 4 different expeditions. 2 of them were 1 year long. And then, but I was working for the Polish Academy of Sciences, and it's a purely scientific institution, right? I've always enjoyed field work. When you work with animals in the field, that's great. Analyzing things in the lab may be a little bit more boring, but I had excellent people around me in the lab, so it was fun times as well. But then writing papers, writing reports, and applying for grants and all this was very tedious. So in my previous years, when I was working at the university, as I said, I really enjoy teaching students.
Yeah.
So the students gave me a lot of energy to be able to cope with those slightly more boring parts of being a scientist. Whereas here at the Academy of Sciences, I'm very happy and grateful that it brought me to Antarctica in the first place, but I was missing my students. And then when I was at the station, tourist ships would arrive, and I got to know some guides. And I thought, well, this is something that sounds like fun. They have lectures on board, so they get the student feeling again. And also, like, one thing that you need to realize is that when you're working at the station, it's fascinating. It's absolutely wonderful experience, because especially when you spend a year there, then you can see the seasons change. You can see the animals come and go and so on. It's beautiful.
But the season changes. Is it just getting colder and colder? Is it like more glaciers, less? Like, what is the season change in Antarctica?
Oh, it's probably one of the most dramatic seasonal changes on the planet, because especially in the area of the Antarctic Peninsula. So in winter, it's not quite dark all the time, because the real polar darkness starts with the polar circle, which is further south. So where the station was, where I spent my winters, even in the middle of winter, we had like 3 or 4 hours of daylight, but mostly darkness. In summer, it's almost 24 hours of daylight, and it's much warmer. And this is where all life begins. So in winter, everything is covered by snow and frozen. The ocean is frozen and so on, and there's hardly any animals. But in spring, thousands of penguins arrive, thousands of seals, thousands of other seabirds. Whales return, and so on. So it's a very dramatic change. And Antarctica in summer shrinks by about 1/3, because this is how much the ice surrounding it was covering.
Oh, wow.
So the whole continent now is the sea. There will be always ice in the sea, but it's not solid ice. So the continent is accessible. So it is a very dramatic change, and then you have this light, and it's getting much warmer. So it's like anywhere between, say, 0 and +7. So which is warmer than the low temperatures in winter. In winter, where I was, the lowest I remember was -27. The lowest ever recorded at my station was -31. I know that for you guys it sounds terrible, but if you compare it to, for example, the middle of the Antarctic continent, where they recorded -91, that's a big difference.
Okay.
That's not
Perspective. It's
where I
all
was.
about perspective, I guess.
Exactly. So summer was great. So basically, when I saw those guides coming, and I became friends with them, because tourists are different on every trip, but the guides are the same. So I got to be friends with them, and eventually they offered me a job. And what I haven't finished is that it's a great experience to live at the station, but it's just one place. You get to know this place very intimately, but you don't get to see other places. Whereas when you're working as a guide, you go to a lot of exciting places, not for so long, just for a few hours, but at least you get to see them, right? So it's like the other side of the same coin. And also, I have, again, the same energy, because I don't have students anymore, but I have my guests who also are not any stupider than I am. They just don't know as much about biology of those particular species, in most cases, right? So that's how I became a guide.
I'm sure some of the guests were different, but I see what you mean. The naivety of students is replaced by the naivety of the tourists, right?
Yeah.
In this,
but they
fascinating-
have brains that operate, so they ask those questions that would never come to my mind, and this is something that drives me.
Nice.
And you talked about, staying in one place for a year, getting to know the place intimately. What was it like actually living there for a year?
Living at the station is a very different experience depending on when it is happening. In summer, there's about 40 people at the base. Polish station is quite typical. I'm sure that Indian station, I don't know actually the details, but I imagine it's similar in size. Most stations are similar in size. There's only one station, McMurdo, from the US, which is like a little town that's completely different to everything else. So the Polish station is quite typical, I would think. And basically, you have about 40 people in summer. But then for the winter, my first winter, we had 13. And my second winter, there were only 8 of us. So it's much more confined.
So it's just like a few months with just the 8 of you in this one place,
exactly,
with probably not much to do given the weather conditions.
We still have, I work in a lab. There's still some internal work that needs to be done. Most of the people that stay for the winter are technicians. So they're carpenters and electricians and mechanics, and they have things to do. But yes, you're right. There's less work. There's still something to do. I mean, there is a point for us being there. And like I go out every 10 days to monitor the numbers of penguins or seals or whatever. We still have things to do. But yes, you have much more time for yourself, which is a great experience again, because then you can finally read all those books that you always wanted to read and never had the time for it, which is great. When I was living at the Polish station, we didn't have internet, which helped.
Kiara, can you imagine a life without internet?
No, I can't.
Well, back then we had satellite phone allowance, and I could spend 9 minutes every month talking to people in Poland, and everything over the 9 minutes I had to pay for. So I'm probably one of the last residents of definitely the last resident of the Polish Antarctic station whose phone bill was actually higher than my salary, because I like talking. and I always exceeded those 9 minutes. And 10 days after I left the station for the last time, which was in 2008, they installed fast internet, and now everything is for free.
They were just waiting for you to leave. They knew that, okay, there's a cash cow
it's
here.
almost like that.
Companies were like, we've got this, and now that Miko's left, we're like, okay, fine, we'll give them it.
Yeah, almost like that. But basically, what I mean is that for the winter time, you're stuck with this small group of people, and they're not necessarily. It's not like going on holidays with your closest friends, right? Everybody is there to do their job. You don't get to choose them. And it may happen that you don't like somebody, or somebody doesn't like you, right? There might be some conflicts, and quite often there are some conflicts arising at the Antarctic stations especially towards the end of the overwintering.
Mm.
So yeah, I had a very interesting character on on the expedition where I was the leader of the station. Basically, he was what you call, I think in the States they call them alt-right.
Okay.
We just call them
Neo-Nazis.
neo-Nazis. Yes,
Mhm.
that's what we call them in Europe. And he was like everything that I'm not. He was misogynistic. He was anti-feminist. He was homophobic. He was racist. He was like, you name it, he was it, right? Very conservative, apparently a very good Catholic, but entertaining us with stories that were not Catholic at all. Anyway, completely the opposite of who I am.
Mm.
However, at the same time, he was possibly the most talented mechanic that ever worked at the station. And that means that he could fix absolutely everything, even including things that had been broken for the last 20 years and nobody could fix them, and he would. And he was also like, with all those weird ideas in his mind, he had a brain and he was quick to make decisions, quick to act. So he was, in fact, my most reliable member of the expedition. Whenever something was happening, he would be the first person that I would call. We very quickly worked out that there's no point in discussing our views on life because we'll just have a fight. But otherwise, working with him was fine. And this is an interesting experience because normally at home, I would not meet such person at all. But here we are stuck together and we need to work as a team and our lives depend on each other. So that's quite interesting.
You put aside your own perspectives on life, politics, etc., and just like, we're here to get a job done and we need to work together to survive. So
yeah, pretty much. That was interesting. And another thing that I find interesting, before I became the base commander, I was already a member of 3 expeditions previously. Mm-hmm. Right? So I saw this and then I confirmed this by talking to people from other stations, other nations, such as Brazil, Argentina, South Korea, Chile. We have all those stations on our island and we are always in touch. And there's always, I wouldn't say conflict, but a little bit of a tension between the scientific group and the technical group. Because the scientists sometimes tend to be very arrogant. They think that the technicians are there as their servants almost. They should be there at every moment they need them. And the scientists forget that if it wasn't for the technicians, the scientists would be dead within 24 hours because they keep the station running, right? On the other hand, you have the technicians and they see scientists as those weirdos who keep pulling them out from important work, such as repairing a water pipe or laying down a new electric circuit or something like this, right? And they ask them to go and collect samples from the ocean of some animals that you cannot even see with your naked eye, so they probably don't even exist. And the technicians are forgetting that this is a scientific station in the first place, so if it wasn't for the scientists, they wouldn't be here and the station wouldn't exist, right? So this is something I realized when I became the base commander. I already knew it and I had it confirmed from other stations that it's always the case. So the first thing I told my people is like, look, I know that this is the tendencies, but we need to overcome this. We need to realize that we are one team and our lives depend on each other. And we cannot see each other as us and them. It's only us, right? And so that was another interesting experience.
It's almost like a lesson from biology to be like, this needs to be a symbiotic relationship. Yes, we need each other versus,
pretty much.
The other way around. And before we get into your guide stories, there are a couple, I've got a number of images in my head thanks to your great descriptions. I'm picturing you, since you love fieldwork, running around while these sneakers, elephant seals are going around and you're like going around and studying them. I'm sure that's not how it works and you're actually doing DNA samples, but I'm picturing that. But I've heard you've had some pretty crazy stories as you've tried to cross glaciers and things like that during your expedition. So,
yeah, that's true. Well, Antarctica is potentially, it just is a very dangerous environment, right? And in places like this, there's always a danger of complacency. If you become complacent, if you have too much trust in your abilities and in your equipment, This is when you are in danger. When I was there, every time I was at the expedition, somebody died, not at my station, but on one of the surrounding stations. And the common denominator was that it was always somebody with a lot of experience. So people who had spent a lot of time in Antarctica, they would just maybe lose focus at some point, and they would do something that they shouldn't be doing, like drive the glacier instead of there was a marked route between the Argentinian station and the Uruguayan station, which goes up to the top of the glacier and then down to the other station. But there were two very experienced guys. One had already, I think, 12 winters behind him in Antarctica, the other one about 4. And they were coming back from the Uruguayan station, but it was getting late. So instead of going up to the glacier and down, they decided to take a shortcut. Now, there is a good reason why you want to go up to the top of the glacier and then down, because that means that even if there are crevasses, they are usually sort of parallel to the edge of the glacier. So if you're going up, you're going across the crevasses, right? If you're going in your skidoo, in your snowmobile, then you can jump above the crevasses without even noticing them. And it's still kind of a little bit dangerous, but much less. But if you're going along, take a shortcut, then you may end up going along a crevasse on top of it, and then the snow will give way and you will drop. So this is exactly what happened, and they died, right? And I had a similar experience. We always, as a rule, have to go across glaciers in teams of at least 2 people. But this time I was coming back from the field. There were multiple reasons why I made the stupid decision of crossing a glacier by myself. I didn't want to bother anybody, right? Which is stupid. I'm learning to ask for help when I need it, but it's still a long process. So I thought that I could see a clear path over the glacier. In my mind, it was a good decision. And also, this is a glacier that I had crossed like 70 times before. But this time, parts of it were covered by snow. And whenever I was still standing on the solid ice, and wherever I put my poles, they were sinking in a crevasse. So I had to back away. And then I ended up jumping across a crevasse that I had just jumped over. But a few minutes earlier, I jumped across it from higher to lower ground. And now I had to jump the other way around. And I didn't, which means that I fell down.
Yeah.
Yes, but it wasn't super wide. I was still able to touch both walls with my hands and put my crampons into the walls of the crevasse. So I climbed out of it, stretched, like this. And then I had to jump out like a penguin. Which I did. Penguins, when they jump out of the water, they basically shoot themselves out. And so this is what I did. I shot myself out from that crevasse.
Wow.
I was quite highly motivated, as you can imagine. So I shot myself with a lot of force, which means that I started sliding down the glacier towards the next crevasse. And I only managed to break like when half of my body was already hanging over it. And this time I would have fallen head first, so I would definitely die. But I didn't die. And I learned not to be complacent. Complacency is what kills people.
This is like Mission Impossible level stuff. It's amazing.
It was fun.
It's fun.
I was laughing hysterically when that was happening, because this would be the stupidest way to die in human history, But so,
well, I can think of stupider ways, right? It's still Antarctica. It's still like, dangerous conditions, etc., etc. But that sounds like a great story because you made it out of there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Very, 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 not sure how to respond to it other than what Kiara said, which is the next time they're holding auditions for a Mission Impossible movie. I don't know if they set one in the snow yet. I feel like there's a role right there for you, Miko, which is like Ethan Hunt is going in there and he's in a crevasse and he's about to fall down. And then he propels himself up and then he has this thumb drive that has this entire knock list and he saves humanity again.
Well, I don't think I'll be interested. I quite like my job.
Which is a great segue to, okay, so you went from all this, you ended up on the expedition side of it, where now you're getting a dose of more people interactions, more variants, going to different places. Just what is a typical day in the life of what you're doing now, in addition to all the stuff you're doing with writing and storytelling, but just
Okay.
in terms of expeditioning.
So there is a big difference between so-called sea days and expedition days, right? The typical trip to Antarctica would be about 10 days long, and that would be 2 days sailing from Ushuaia in Argentina to the Antarctic Peninsula. During those 2 days, we have our presentations. When I started, I used to be working as a marine biologist, so I would give presentations about whales and seals and anything connected with life. But about 10 years ago, because I had already been working in Antarctica a lot and I quite like it, so I read a lot of books, I thought that I would try something new. So now, most of the time, I'm a historian on board talking about old exploration and things like this. And this is, I think, when we and Kiara met. So we have those presentations. It's usually about 4 presentations a day, but there are at least 5 presenters. So there's an ornithologist who talks about birds. There's a marine biologist who talks about whales and seals. There is a historian who talks about history of exploration. There is a glaciologist or geologist who talks about rocks and ice and things like this. And there's also a photographer who gives presentations about how to take photos in Antarctica. So each one of us would have at the most 1 presentation during the day, right? So most of the rest of the day, I'm kind of free. I still need to, I cannot just stay in my cabin closed because there are guests walking around the ship and I need to interact with them and so on. But it's much more relaxed. And then we get to the peninsula region where we try to get off the ship at least twice a day. So I would start getting ready, which means getting into my gear, which takes about 10 minutes to put all those layers on. I need to put much more and different layers than our guests, right? And then so when I'm fully dressed, I would go to the place where we store our zodiacs. Zodiac is a like
boats,
a small boat with a powerful engine, right? And we have a crane that would pick them from the ship and put them on the water.
And is the ornithologist operating the crane?
Oh yeah, no.
Because the crane's a bird, right? Sorry, I had to get a dad joke in. I couldn't resist, but sorry.
Yes, I can see the temptation. No, it's sailors that do it, but oh God. And then I have to get my Zodiac ready for the guests. So after I make sure that my boat is ready, I drive to the ship, and by this time Kiara is ready, and everybody else, all of the guests, right? And they're called by a group. And so when my boat is ready, and we have a little lineup of zodiacs, right? And one by one we come to the ship, we pick our guests, and then depending whether we have a landing, I take 10 guests to the shore, where there is a penguin colony, or maybe Antarctic station, or maybe just beautiful views, or maybe some other interesting things. Sometimes some historical artifacts, such as in Deception Island, for example, and so on. And then they spend about maybe 2.5 hours there, and then we drive them back to the ship, and it's the same procedure in reverse, right? And then we have lunch. And in the afternoon, again, we try to get off the ship. The ship has moved from one place to another in the meantime. Again, I start about an hour earlier than the guests, maybe 45 minutes. And now we may again have a landing, or maybe we have a Zodiac cruise. That would mean that for up to 2 hours, for example, if the weather is nice, I just drive around amongst icebergs or maybe whales or something like this. So sometimes we don't touch land, right? And then we come back to the ship again. It's late afternoon. Before dinner, we have what we call a recap, which is a meeting where we sort of summarize what has been happening during the day. If we visited an interesting historical site, then I will give you a very short, it's not even a mini lecture, it's like 7 minutes of explanation what it was and so on. And if we saw a whale, then the marine biologist would tell you what whale it was and what are the interesting things about that whale and so on and so on. And then we have our expedition leader would talk about our plans for the next day. And then we have dinner. And after dinner, sometimes we have a bar talk, which is a less formal thing that one of us is talking about, like, oh, well, I was the first woman to ever circumnavigate Svalbard in a kayak, right? We have a friend like this, and she would give us a story of circumnavigation of Svalbard. I would give some more insight into my work with elephant seals, and so on, so on. So this is a typical day on the ship during the expedition days. And then after 5 of those expedition days, we again have 2 sea days to go back to Ushuaia.
Nice. And the Drake shake comes at the start, at the end, somewhere there.
It may. It doesn't mean that Drake is notorious. Yes, it is the stormiest part of the ocean, but it doesn't mean that there's always a storm. And also, I have to say that there has been a very interesting change over the last 10 years, because as the weather forecasts become more precise, and also our ships are stronger and faster, we know exactly where the storm is, and we can make an effort to try to avoid it. So honestly, I have not been in a really, really big storm for like 10 years.
Wow.
Because we try everything to avoid it. We go around it, we go behind it, we try to escape it, and so on. And we're getting better at it. So it's not so bad anymore.
Whoever's doing those weather forecasts needs to get them into the cities, because the city forecasts are like, oh, it rained today. And then, nope, it doesn't rain. Oh, it's sunny today. And then it rains. So,
yes, well, I never trust the forecast, really. I just sort of look out the window and know what's going on. But at least when it comes to big weather systems like a storm, a cyclone coming, then you can see them coming, right?
Nice. And with that whole story, I'm still picturing the next Mission Impossible plot, which is someone going through a glacier, going through a crevice, landing on a Zodiac, quickly setting it off, and then someone forgets to go from inflate to navigate, and then it gets punctured, but then Ethan Hunt swims through the snow, lands somewhere near an elephant seal. Like, this is the next movie. I think we've got a story here which we could sell to Hollywood.
Yeah. Okay, it will make us very rich, I'm sure.
Miko, it would be your story, but it seems like Arvind really, really wants to direct it.
Yes, I think so.
Next collaboration between you two.
There you go.
Why not?
If someone my age feels torn between, a safe path of life or a path where they get to follow their passions and the things that they're curious about, what's your advice to them?
Okay, so I can now relate to this because I actually do have a story. A few years ago, no, maybe now about 15 years ago, I received an email. I was still working at the Polish Academy of Sciences, so somebody found my email in on the webpage of the institute, and it was an email from a young woman, and it started with, "My name is this and that. You probably don't remember me, but 5 years ago you had a presentation in our school." And she said where the school was. So it was a high school, and she was 18, and which is the time when you need to choose your career in Poland, right? So she was just about to finish her high school, and she approached me, and this is what she describes in that letter. "I approached you saying that I really like biology, but my parents," and maybe this is important, that school is in a very small town, but it's a private school, which means that parents have to pay. Like, we have free education in Poland, but also we have private schools that parents have to pay for, right? So her parents basically were business people from that small town, right? And when she told them that she wants to study biology, they said, "No, that's a stupid idea because you won't get any job after that. So you need to study law or business or something like this, which will give you a proper income in the future." But she didn't want to. And she came to me saying, "Look, I really like biology. I'm not interested in law. I'm not interested in business. And I have no idea what to do. Shall I go against the will of my parents?" And I said, "Well, look, you're a smart girl. You'll probably be a decent lawyer or a good doctor or maybe a decent businesswoman, but you won't be excellent And you won't ever be happy because you will not be doing things that are your passion, right?
Mm.
And only when you are passionate about something can you be excellent at it. So you'll be good enough. Yes, you'll make a living, but it will be an unhappy life because you will have a lot of money possibly, but you will not be following your passion. On the other hand, if you choose something that you are passionate about, then like inevitably you will be very good at it because this is your passion. And then it means that you being so good at it, one way or another, you will find a way of applying this for your practical life. So basically, you will find employment because you'll be so good. So, in my mind, following your heart is the most reasonable choice, right? Despite what other people say, what reasonable is. That's actually not reasonable because it only leads to an unhappy life of not doing what you're passionate about. So, following your heart is the reasonable choice. And that's all I can say. I'm not telling you that you have to go against the will of your parents. This is my perspective. This is what I find out in my life. So she wrote me this email 5 years later, reintroducing that conversation. And she said, so I went against the will of my parents. They were very angry with me. We almost lost contact for a while. But I went to study biology. And now I'm just about to graduate. And in 1 month, I'm going to Borneo for my PhD studying orangutans. And it's all because of what you told me. And it's like, wow, at this stage, I had tears running down my cheeks and a big lump up my throat and so on. So I still think that if you find something that you're passionate about, this is what you should be doing. And as I said, the practical will come with it, I will never be very rich, but I'm very happy. I've got enough, but I'm not interested in money. Money is not a purpose. Money is only a means, to realize what you're passionate about. And it will come with you being very good at something. It will happen somehow.
That is very inspiring and makes a lot of sense. And the way that story panned out, I can imagine you may not even have remembered the conversation, but the impact you had on that girl's life, clearly life-changing. So kudos on that one, Miko.
Thank you. And then this is why we become teachers, that basically this is the great satisfaction in being a teacher, because you can actually affect somebody's life in a positive way.
Very cool.
We're back. And here for the 14 going on 41 what if segment. So this is a segment where we ask all questions starting with what if. And Miko, to explain it to you, we're sort of asking you about what if certain moments had changed and how you think your life would have played out. So I'm going to start us off with the first question, which is, you've talked so much about, the polar regions and your love for cold weather. What if you'd actually grown up somewhere warm? Do you think your life would look totally different?
It probably would, yes. But this is something I'm not sure if I really like the what if questions, because there is no way to know what would have happened, But I think that if I was born in a hotter place, then I still don't think I would like the hot. I would just be even more miserable than I am normally.
You sound like my niece who's grown up in Singapore, and her single focus of going to uni is, I want to go to a place that has seasons and is cold. So,
oh, nice.
It might have been you. Okay, my what if is more career related. And you talked about that big fork in the road moment where you had that university job that you kind of had, but then it got taken away and then you ended up in Antarctica. What if that job had never got taken away and you actually had that in the university? Where do you think you'd be today?
Yeah, well, just like all of my friends, I would be a professor at the university. And I would probably be reasonably happy, but because I really enjoyed working there, but I would never have gone to Antarctica, which again, I wouldn't know about it because I would not have tried it, right? So I wouldn't know what I would be missing. Although I think that because some of my older friends and some of my university teachers had been to Antarctica, I would be still dreaming about it. So one way or another, I would try to find my way there. But I would be quite happy being a teacher at the university, with the students and stable income and so on. And yeah, I'm sure my family would be happier about it.
What if on your first Antarctic expedition, right? You're going there, your first year, you're excited about it. What if that went really bad? Like, what if you went there and said, "Oh, the cold is not so good. I'm like Antarctica is not for me." And I know it's really hard to fathom because it feels like that's your calling. But if that was the case, how might things have panned out differently?
Well, then I probably wouldn't want to go back there again. And then what I would do, I have no idea, honestly. I would try to get to some other university, I guess. I had some offers from different institutes, but again, they were all research institutes from the Polish Academy of Sciences. So because I like teaching, I would probably try to get a position somewhere at the university. But I also enjoy working with non-governmental organizations, such as Greenpeace, for example. And so maybe I would be more concentrating on nature conservation and activism in this area.
And you think in Poland, some other exotic part of the world where?
When I was a student, I spent 1 year studying in the UK. I spent 3 months in London and then 6 months in Manchester. And I quite liked it, but I also like living in Poland. So I feel like as much as I love traveling, I feel like there is this rubber band attached to my belt that always brings me back home. So I never really considered living abroad, but who knows? Canada is nice. New Zealand is nice. These are the two places that always appealed to me. I have never been to New Zealand. I have been to Canada, but not much. And I quite liked it.
Okay. What if you hadn't said yes to working with passengers? Where do you think you'd be spending a lot of your time now?
I have no idea again. It's because, as I said, before they even offered me a job on the ship, I already thought it would be an interesting job. So I was lucky enough that they actually asked me to work for them. Mind you, it was because they made a big mistake. The company that I work for, Quark, they landed a ship at my station without announcing it prior. So, which is not what we do. Yeah. Like we have to speak to the base commander 48 hours before landing, and they didn't. And so I was quite angry initially, but then the expedition leader was an old friend of mine. So we ended up chatting, and I said that, I'm interested in a job on a small ship when I come back from Antarctica after this expedition. And later, about a week later, an offer came from Quark Expeditions saying that we are very excited to hear that you may want to work for us. So basically, the message of the story is that sense of guilt is a great motivator because they messed it up and they wanted to compensate for it. But no, I can't honestly imagine saying no to this job. So I have no idea what I would be doing.
But it is funny. That mistake led to them landing up there. That led to a conversation later. That led to you where you are. It's funny how the river that you talked about at the start meanders and gets to. Let me ask you one, which is, what if you were 14 years old? And I'm going to take one of Kiara's question. In today's day and age, right? With all that's changing, with technology, with awareness, with AI, with also greater awareness, but also greater acceleration of some of the issues around climate change, etc. If you were 14 today and you had to redesign your career from scratch, is there something you'd do differently? And let's assume Antarctica is off the table. Where do you think you might see yourself going?
Still the same way. I'm sorry. I'm boring like this. It's like, if I was my daughter's age now, I would probably still pursue biology.
Understood. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so the next thing we have lined up is a short game, and it's called the happiness rating game. Arvind, would you like to explain it to Miko?
Sure, Mika. This is a pretty straightforward one. And you touched on a little bit of it already when you talked about, I wouldn't be happy, this makes me happy, etc. So you'll, I think, enjoy this. We just have 7 parameters and we just list them. And you just rate from 1 to 5 how important they are for your happiness. So 1, not so important, 5, super important, just quick 1 to 5 ratings. And so the first one is fame. How important is that to your happiness?
1.
Okay, friendships or connections?
5.
How about wealth?
2. Like, I don't want to worry about what I'm going to eat tomorrow, but I'm really not interested in being rich.
Makes sense.
Okay, the next one is health.
4.
Makes sense. Probably what propelled you to get out of the glacier, because health
Yeah.
is what you're going to need to live.
Yeah.
So makes sense. How about fun?
5.
Could see that coming.
And the next one I have is legacy.
Legacy. 3.
Okay. We might unpackage that a bit more, but the last one then is impact.
Oh, well, I guess it depends on impact on what. But I would just say 3 again, I guess. I don't want to be important, but I would like to have changed the world a little bit, maybe by educating people and so on.
By educating people. Got it. I was going to ask how on impact, and that can also tie into a bit of legacy, which is what you leave behind is the stories and the impact you've had on the world. But that is very cool. I think very clear sense of what is important or not for you. And I think that clarity also leads to you making the choices that you've made. It's also, when we ask a bunch of the what if questions, it's hard for you to imagine an alternate reality because there is so much congruence with the reality that you are living and that you've chosen. So really enjoyed hearing those stories, Miko. Appreciate you making the time. And hopefully we'll get to see you again in some part of the world, whether you make it out to warm Singapore or India, or maybe in Antarctica or Poland.
Yeah, I would love that. I've enjoyed talking to you both. It's thank you again, Kiara, for remembering that I exist and also for inviting me here. And yes, I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
And just to touch back on impact, I just wanted to say you definitely had a big impact on me and my parents, and that whole trip, it changed my life. So I have to thank you for that. And I really, really have to thank you for your time here today, because I had a lot of fun talking to you and getting to know more about your journey. So thank you so much, Miko. Dziękuję.
Thank you so much. Thank you both, and all the best.
Thank you. Sounds like that was a core memory, Kiara.
Yes.
Okay.
Arvind and I will be back to wrap up and do the good old days.
And we're back, and it's time to wrap up, which means, Kiara, it's first time for the good old days.
Okay, I've prepared myself, ready to get this going.
So as Miko was talking today, Kiara, I'm actually going to introduce you more to a concept as opposed to some quirky term like cable TV or anything else. But two concepts that were big in the good old days.
Yes?
I was quiet for a reason, because one of those concepts is silence and the other concept is boredom. And I thought back at this in terms of how Miko was talking about, even offline, when he was telling us about how, you need to really observe the animals. There's a bit more quiet time. He talked about no internet at points, and then you can catch up on your reading. And yes, there's a bit less work to do. But if you think back to explorers and scientists, you in the past, you had like weeks of just waiting for weather to change, for ice to move, for animals to appear, and there was nothing to distract you, no constant input. You had to learn to be still without going a bit mad.
You talked about no distractions. I think just as a 14-year-old, it's very horrible of me, but I'm constantly distracted. If I have nothing to do, I will pick up my phone and I will start doing something, whether it's scrolling or just doing that. There's not a single moment where I feel like I'm there and I'm not doing anything. I'm constantly trying to do something. So I think it's very interesting that your good old concept is just being there.
Yeah. No, I think just sitting in observation, watching that same patch of ice. It's a bit like I get into bird watching now, and just sitting for a while and like following this bird for a bit. I think it's a little bit of silence in some level actually trains attention, right? And if you aren't patient, you miss things. And that's with like subtle animal behavior or changes in weather, etc. But I think even in life, I think that's a good lesson as you think about just silence, training attention, and getting away from that constant distraction and just having some moments to yourself. So That's my slightly different good old days lesson for you today. But in terms of other lessons, what did you take away from everything Miko had to share with us today?
So I get that this is actually like so connected to the whole theme of our podcast. But when you do something unconventional, you're doing it because it makes you happy. And the way that Miko was like, he didn't think about, oh, this is not what other people my age might be doing. This is not what a lot of other people do. But this makes me so happy. I'm passionate about this. I'm curious about these certain things. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. And that's taken him to this amazing place in his life where he's got to do all the amazing things and become so knowledgeable.
Yeah, and it's funny that advice also rung through to a student of his who reached out and who still reached out to him 5 years later, saying she went down a path thanks to his advice. So no, I think that's a very good one. For me, another thing that I took away was his lesson about not getting too complacent in his Antarctica near-death experience, which was pretty scary. I'm glad he was able to laugh through it, even as he was going through that harrowing experience. But he talked about how it was some of the more experienced folks who'd had these accidents or had, just not made it through. And he talked about complacency. And I think not taking things for granted, not being too sure of yourself, but having that respect for nature. But beyond nature, I think that lesson applies to life as well, which is don't get too complacent in one place. Things are always changing. Things are evolving. Have that humility, have that recognition that every instance is different, and make sure you're at least being guarded and thoughtful about how you approach things.
Yeah, I think so many lessons today. Your takeaway, my takeaway, even what we were discussing with the good old days is such a life lesson in the times that we're living in. So a lot of things were learned during this episode, but unfortunately, I think it's time for it to end. So until then, drive safe, but we'll see you next episode.
Peace out, party people.